I'd like to welcome everybody to Gardening Green Expo 2024. The sponsors of the expo are the NSRWA, the Water Smart Program, and Kennedy's Country Gardens. Now, I wanted to let you know before we get started that we are going to have a Q&A session at the end. So if you hover your mouse over your screen, you'll see a little icon that says Q&A. And if you type your questions in there, then I will ask them for you at the end. And also there's a thing called chat, and Susan has some downloads that she would like. So I'm going to paste the links in there for you. So now I would like to introduce Susan Leigh Anthony.
Hi, everybody. Thank you all for coming. Tonight, I've done this a few times, and tonight, rather than focus too much on native plants, which I know is like, that's kind of what we do, right? But I'm going to certainly bring some of those into the mix. But something I thought people don't really talk about too much is because I'm a generalist in terms of plants, and I with a real focus on ornamental plants and making beautiful gardens because I'm a designer, and perennials. And so what I want to focus on is how do we make a garden that suits us, whether it be something very contemporary and simple, or something very sort of formal English garden, or country cottage garden, which I know a lot of people really like. And how do we do that and still be careful about the amount of water we use? So there are tons and tons, and I believe me, I didn't cover everything, but tons and tons of plants that fit into that category. So that's mostly what I'm going to talk about. And I'm going to run the gamut with it. So I'm going to start with my first slide here. Achieving a beautiful and sustainable garden is what I called it. And, we all know climate. We're in climate change. It's happening, and it's happening fast. And we all know that in the area in which we live, there's a huge toll being taken on our water supplies, and we're not getting enough rain, and we're getting too many people using the water we have. And so, we end up with bans and having to be really careful. So we're got to start to learn to adapt. And I'm not saying that we have to grow cacti and things like that, and have it look like we live in, Scottsdale, Arizona. And we don't have to plant the same old things that you see everywhere. And, I am a plantaholic without a doubt. I'm going to hopefully show you some plants that you've not considered. They are drought tolerant. But just so you're very clear on what that means, it doesn't mean you go and you plant it and you walk away, and if it doesn't rain, you don't have to water it ever. No, you have to water, not so often, but deeply. Deeply but infrequently is once things get established. That's the way you water. I also want to talk about something that I have recently read about, and it says grow it slow. And this is interesting. Fast growing plants use more water than those that grow slowly. So don't rush your plants. I mean, we all are like fertilize, right? If you have good soil, your plants really should be fine on their own. I do like to use organic fertilizers. I like to use manure and compost. But when a plant is actively growing, the more they're doing that, the more they're going to be having to take more water. So just something to think about. And you should minimize your pruning too when it gets to the point where it's the water is low, because pruning is going to make it want to sort of grow too. So that said, let's get going on some pictures here. One of the things that first came to mind to me was, there, especially with all the rain we've had, that there are going to be places that you see in the kind of wet weather, when we do have wet weather that we have, that are gonna fill up. And you're gonna go, oh my God, it's flooding and, this is low area in my yard. And so those are the places where if you have to grow things like a stilby, which is this plant in the very middle with the pink fronds, that's a ostrich plume stilby. That's the kind of plant that's gonna like some moisture. So this garden is a bit sunken in my yard, just a little bit. And and it's also one I can watch because I go by it. And but it's by this time is pretty well established, so I don't need to give it a lot of water. There are tree peonies in here too. I don't know if this works for me to do my cursor, but there are tree peonies in here, not in bloom. That happens earlier. All peonies are quite drought tolerant once they're established. So I'm going to keep moving on here. Rain gardens is something I really don't know much about, but I think they're worth considering researching. And I'm not even going to try to get into it too much. I can just tell you that it's a beautiful way to reduce runoff from your property. And they can also help filter out pollutants in the runoff and provide food and shelter for butterflies, songbirds, and other wildlife. And it helps divert water in a managed way. So it's not just wasted and runs off your property. So here are some, and I'm sorry, I don't think for sure that I actually that this isn't a handout, but I would just look up some stuff about this. If you're going to build one, know what you're doing, and if you don't feel like you really know what you're doing, get someone to do it that's qualified. Here's a picture of a beautiful, this is a very famous garden photographer, Rob Cardillo, and he was very nice. He let me use this picture. Those are all Camassia, which is a bulb, and it doesn't bloom in early spring. It blooms a bit later. So this is a moist area. I can see that this is a moist, low area. I can tell by even the things that are growing behind it. So this is on a grand scale, of course, but just to say, this can be really beautiful. It's kind of a wet meadow. So the next one, I did touch on some evergreens, and I mean on some native plants, just a bit. Here's some evergreen natives that are drought tolerant, just two, and I'm showing you their characteristics. At the top, on the left is the eastern red cedar, which we see all over the place here. Tough plant, tough plant. And the berries on top, what they look like, so beautiful. On the right is a holly, American holly. This is a very sort of well cared for, well coiffed one. I mean, we see them, we're driving through Situate, we see them out in the woods, the West End and stuff. Those are trying to get light from all kinds of directions. They're kind of planted in between, like a beech tree and a God knows what. And so they're a little gangly looking, but they certainly can be pruned, and if to be kept in the shape you'd like. And on the bottom, of course, I think I couldn't help not using this pretty one with the snow over it. So evergreens do look really pretty with snow, if we ever get any again, right? All right, moving on. This is just one of several, okay? And there's lists all over the place of drought tolerant native trees. This is a deciduous one. The top left is the flower, which is very insignificant, but it will turn into a beautiful berry, very almost purple black. And the fall color is beautiful, which you can see there on the left bottom and on the right. Gets to be a large tree. And black Tupelo is what this is. And whenever I hear Tupelo, I think of Tupelo honey, and then I think of Van Morrison, and I'm off and running. So anyway, that's just one that people don't think about. And it is a native. It's a good looking tree. Some shrubs that I like. Now, my next door neighbor has the Aronia arbustifolia. And I love that particular one because it has red berries. And it's a great plant for pollinators and for birds. She hardly ever waters at all, okay? The difference in our water bills is really kind of pathetic. She hardly ever waters, and she's actually teaching me that I don't need to water as much as I used to think I did. But hers do fine. They will take part shade as well. And it's I think, a very attractive shrub. Way over on the right, of course, and I've talked about this plant before, it's something from my childhood. Reminds me of my childhood. The scent of it is sweet fern, Comptonia peregrina. So there's that. Here are some conifers that are not natives but are attractive, and there's millions. I mean, I didn't even know, I just like, well, that's pretty, let me use that one. That one's nice. And I tried to get some variety. So on the far left is a Picea aves, which is a spruce, Norway spruce. Acrocona is the cultivar. Nice drapey feeling, very much a specimen plant. Pinus contorta, the variety is latifolia. Taylor's sunburst, is it? My face is in the way, yeah. And is the one in the middle, and those gold tips are what I think kind of, make it extremely special. And they do fade as the season progresses, but on the far right is Juniperus communis compressa. Whenever you see junipers, it's going to be very drought tolerant, and there's many forms. I just thought this was a neat one. Doesn't get too tall. I think it only gets about 1.5 feet wide and 6 feet tall. So anyway, not to the next one. We got so the plant in the middle, and I wish that was a little less blurry, but it's a Cornus mass. It's also called Cornus is a dogwood. Okay, this does not look like any dogwood you've ever imagined. Okay, but it is, and it's also called Cornelian cherry, and it's not a cherry. It is a Cornus. It's extremely early, extremely early. There's some beautiful ones up at the Arnold Arboretum. There's a gorgeous one in Situate on First Parish Road, not too far from that new Roots Nursery across the street near Ronnie Shones. But anyway, it's a very cool plant, hardly ever used. It's not super showy, it's there's just something I think very, very cool about it, very medieval. And to the left and right are plants I think look great and that are early. And I think any of you who would grow hellebores know that they are extremely early. I mean, mine have been starting to bloom for the last two weeks at least. This sort of eggplant color is stunning under this sort of chartreuse color. And then Cyannodoxa, or Glory of the Snow, over on the right. And bulbs are so easy once you get them going. I do want to say that some bulbs are very attractive to deer and bunnies. I use Plant Skid, PLANTSKYDD. It's not poisonous or anything like that. It's just smells awful to those guys. So because they really like tulips, and it's very maddening to come out and have them all eaten. But anyway, I do plant a lot of bulbs every year. The 400 bulbs every year. It's insane. And what a lot of that is I'm replacing tulips. However, on the left-hand side here, Tulipa bakeri. It's called Lilac Wonder, but I think it's more pink. Yeah. Anyway, this is a species tulip. Species tulips are low. Okay, they're not going to be tall, things for, big bouquets. But they are much more perennial because it is the species. The further away you get from the species, the more trouble a plant usually is. But these are truly perennial. Be careful of things digging up your tulips too, because I had that happen one year. Anyway, in the middle are Fritillaria meleagris, or checkered lily. It's always been one of my favorite plants. It's just, I don't know, there's something just so old-fashioned and beautiful about it. Those little geometric patterns, that's why they call it checkered lily. And way over on the right is a Salome narcissus daffodil. I don't have any of the yellow daffodils in my yard. I only have these with the apricot trumpets, or I have straight white ones. And that's just my personal preference. The good thing, one of the good things about narcissus is that they don't get eaten because they're quite poisonous. Let's see. I do like Van Engelen and Brenton Becky's for buying bulbs. There are other places as well. Oh man, this is what happened. Okay. Let's see. No. Okay, here we go. Okay, so on the left is a double pink chiffon rose of Sharon, which is not a rose. It is a hibiscus syriacus, and there are many different colors. There are singles. There are white, berry colored ones. There's a bunch of different colors. I have 3 different colors. This one is my newest, and I just got all excited about this pale pink color. It's so pretty. And these are in keeping with the New England cottage style, and they also give you some height and also floral excitement in the garden. That's a pretty late bloomer. That's August into September. The one at the top on the right is Vitex agnes castus. That grows, they're all sun for the most part, although the hibiscus will take a little shade. The Vitex or chase tree has a great long history. I'd love to tell you, but I don't have time. And that blooms very, very late. Nice spiky purple color. The one on the underneath that, the flowering quencher Chinomales, that blooms very early. That blooms right around the same time as Forsythia. I just thought that color was spectacular, and this is a range of colors. There's no blues and purples or yellows really, but there's whites and pinks and apple blossom and tons of different colors, red. Okay, here we go into, I am a big fragrance person, and I don't know, I've not met, I should say, anyone who says, oh, I hate the smell of lilacs. Like, oh, what? So these are just 3 different types. I think the one on this left is Sensation. The one on the right, I'm not sure, but it is a white one, clearly. And I believe the one on the far right is Monge, M-O-N-G-E, I think. There are a few good, very deep, almost red purple ones, and that is one. But super, really an easy plant, doesn't particularly like real acid soil, but I haven't really found them to be that picky. And just prune as required. But again, let me just stress again that everything needs to be watered, especially the first year or so. Give it ample water. You can't expect them to be water starved especially when they're new. They'll adapt once they're established. So here's a lilac grove, okay? And I just think I could picture, like just sitting in a bench, just amongst these, and or a nice hammock sitting there would be nice. Anyway, I had knew a woman in Situate. She's no longer with us, but she ran a nursery school, and she had not maybe this large, but a grove of lilacs, under which she planted Scilla siberica, which there's a slide coming up. It's a very low, very brilliant blue little bulb. And it was a literal carpet of them. And she, when they were in bloom, she would dig them up, just one or two, in a little Dixie cup, and give them to all the kids at the nursery school. So I just thought it was wonderful. Because plants, there's always like cool stories associated with them one way or the other. So here's, obviously, not a fancy garden here, but here it is in mass, the Scilla. And it's even more blue than, so those are them. Okay, here we have on the left, a shrub I, always loved. It's a Daphne. It's Daphne Carol Mackey is the cultivar. It has a lot going for it. It is variegated. The foliage is variegated so that even when it's not in bloom, it's attractive. It's got something going for it. Then when it's blooming, which is mid-spring, this is a good picture of it because that is really the color. Soft, soft pink like that. Super fragrant, gorgeous fragrance. Fabulous. And then over on the right, I think everybody has seen a million of these, and it's a classic hydrangea paniculata, unlike the mophead blue hydrangeas that do need water and are often finicky about blooming for us. These paniculatas are tough as nails once they get established and sort of Victorian looking. Right. Here's some other really wonderful shrubs, and on the left is Caryopteris clandinensis or bluebeard, and there actually is a pink one now, I think, but I don't know. I think this blue is just so gorgeous. That's the classic one, and blooms very late, August into early September, I'd say, and I'm a big proponent of blue, and I think a lot of people really do get drawn to blue plants. In the middle is beautyberry or Calicarpa americana. Again, there are other cultivars of this. There is a pink one, I think, called Welch's pink that I have not seen yet, but I've wondered about. And I know there's a white one. I used to have one in another place I lived. But look at this color. It's so dazzling. And believe me, this plant does nothing most of the time, okay, until very late, like October, late October into November, when all the leaves have fallen off and you just see the bare branches with these berries clustered, and they are great. And I like them at Thanksgiving to bring them in and put them with other plants, flowers for centerpieces and so forth. And then far on the right, two pictures. The first one at the top, this pink one, is a close-up of the flower. And then on the bottom is the shrub itself, which is beauty bush, not beautyberry, beauty bush, Colquitzia amabilis. And it's, I guess, pretty old-fashioned. I knew a lady that had one, and I always thought it was dreamy, and I hardly, if ever, see it sold anymore. I know you can get them, but it's really a beautiful cottagey shrub, very, very pretty. And it's drought tolerant. Ilex verticillata. Now we drive by and we see them growing in the swamps, and yeah, they love it there, but they will also do very well without a lot of water and hot, dry conditions. I have some red ones, the species in my front yard, the orange one, the winter gold. I have one I've had for years on the side of my house, and I'm not an orange person, but by that time of year, when everything is done, and there's nothing clashing with it, I love driving down the street and seeing those bright orange berries. So just saying, you don't have to get the red ones. There are other colors. Now roses, people think roses, you kidding me? Well, there are some that are pretty drought tolerant. I think generally speaking, they are somewhat drought tolerant. These are exceptionally drought tolerant. I'm just going to talk about the one in the middle, which is a rugosa, super fragrant. It's a fancy rugosa called Teresa Bugnet, I think is how you say it. I hate to think that it's actually Teresa Bugnet, so I'm going to say Bugnet. And very fragrant and tough. On the two sides are Rosa glauca, also called Rosa rubrifolia, because it depends on what time of year you're looking at the foliage. I think it's red when it's first coming out. And then it gets the blue tint. So even though it's not a showy flower, it's still very pretty. Those pinks against that foliage are beautiful. And they, even when they're not in bloom, the foliage is so exceptionally pretty. It's what they call a glaucous foliage. Okay. Crevice plants, over in Hingham and Cohasset, there's a lot of people with ledge. And these are some plants that do well in pockets, little space where there's a little bit of soil. And because they don't have, when plants are really short, they don't have deep roots. And and these are just, they've been evolved to not need a lot of water. Armeria maritima or thrift is the one on the left. Blooms for a very long time. And it, what's I gonna say? Oh, you can deadhead these and they will bloom, they will keep blooming. You can see these little guys just still ready to keep going. So keep it deadheaded and it will look really pretty. On the right is Delosperma or ice plant. I just thought that was a really pretty one. I will tell you that there are differences between ones that are hardy and ones that are not. And in some of my resources, there's an article by a man I know. He's actually head of Rock Garden Society of America, and he also is like the head guy out at Denver Botanical Garden. Anyway, dropping names here, huh? Anyway, he has written a really good article about which ones are and which ones aren't. Here's some more crevice plants and, thyme, and these will grow between stones, stepping stones. These creeping ones are not super fragrant, so don't be disappointed. You haven't lost your sense of smell. That's not really what they're for. You might smell a little bit on a hot day. It's the culinary types that are taller that are the ones that are really fragrant, have all those oils in them. In the middle is Campanula rotundifolia or harebells. And I have seen this growing out of crevices up in New Hampshire on the Kangamangas. And it really does grow out of cracks. On the right is Albrecia, and it's just, it's got sort of a succulent foliage. You can see it's growing out of a crack, pretty purple flower. And that is a spring one. I'm going to talk about annuals a little bit because there are so many more annuals that are exciting than what we tend to usually see at most garden centers. Although the two on the left here, you can find them. Evolvulus blew my mind. I love the name. And this is not the best picture. I have this growing. I didn't find a picture of my own, but I have it growing in that top area where it's very dry, where a lot of my thymes are. And it blooms all summer. Yeah, it looks great. Middle one, Verbena bonariensis. Paul kind of looks like purple polka dots. Will self-sow a bit. The California poppy way over on the right. The orange one is the species, and they've come up with some other ones that are some interesting colors, maybe not quite as easily self-sowing, but I do go for some of those other colors. Very easy by seed. Cynoglossin amabile you can do by seed. I love blue, so there it is. It's a bit like a forget-me-not, but taller. The Cerinthe major or honeywort, one of my favorite plants. It's all about the colors on the bracts, and they really do look like that. Really nice in a kind of drapey in a container. Oreganum Kent Beauty is a ornamental oregano, and those are bracts. The flowers are inside. Very great. You can get that. That is not so hard to find. The two photos on the left side, the left and the middle, are my front yard. And things have changed a little bit, but I just wanted to point out that there's lavender, there's thyme. You can see the rose there is, pretty happy. It's just very dry up there. There's another section of this garden that is lower, where below the stone wall. So you see a hydrangea, macrophylla down there, which of course does not like it dry. That's in shade, and that is lower down. So anyway, I'm just showing that there are some plants up here that are dry plants. And I know there's some other plants that I have up there. I have verbascum, which is not in bloom at this time. And that'll self-sow a little bit. Blue perennial flax, Linum peren. Dunce's caps, which is a kind of a succulent. That's a very fun one. And dianthus, you just can't really see them at this point. Over on the right is a hot driveway garden that I installed for a client down on Third Cliff. And there's yarrow, there are roses, there are two kinds of yarrow actually. There are what else? Those daisies, the banana cream daisies, which are like a Shasta daisy, and alyssum, or lobularia, which is an annual, and salvia caradonna, which all the salvias are really tough when it comes to drought. And then I did put a morning glory in there. That this garden was brand new, I just finished it. So it's not doing anything yet, but they are actually fairly drought tolerant. So, okay. This is just a nice collection of plants, and all of these are written. I'm gonna maybe speed up a little bit. All of these plants are written on your handout, okay, under the number of the slide. But just it's a nice mix, okay. The only thing that is a annual truly is the Nicotiana Langsdorffii down here that I popped in. But I just thought the rest of these, some really long blooming, great pollinators, so here's another one. Some things that people don't think of, verbascums, and I mentioned that a minute ago. There are lots of different kinds, and I think they are way underused. They're a bit short-lived perennial, but they will self-sow, and maybe you want to collect some seed, but lots of different colors. The top, that perennial geranium is Roseanne, and really all of the geraniums are pretty drought tolerant. The macrorhizum, or the big root geranium, is particularly so. Down the bottom, that hazy kind of blue gray color is sea holly, and this is a picture in Hyde Park in London, and it was a very dry garden. The whole thing is a dry garden. And that's it in mass, and it is just a great, I've used that in many places for sunny or seaside or any of that. On the far right is Jupiter's beard, or Centranthus ruber, and I loved when my mother said the word Jupiter's beard. I just loved to even think about what Jupiter's beard would look like. Jupiter himself with his beard. But anyway, I love this plant. I love the color. It's highly underused. It's a little finicky. It's one of those things that grows in England and likes a chalkier soil. So you might want to give it a little lime, because we're naturally acidic. So that's sometimes the problem with plants, that it doesn't do well for me. In drainage. These a lot of these plants that like it dry cannot sit in cold, wet winters. So salvias across the board, fabulous drought tolerant plants. I'm not going to talk too much about these. They're on your sheet. The one on the left is a perennial, caradonna, which I've talked about, and the other two are annuals of different heights. And they are just, the hummers. My God, the hummers absolutely love the salvias. Okay, silver foliage plants are huge. Anything that looks like it grows in the Mediterranean, which these types of plants do. They're reflective. The foliage is reflective. Sometimes it's small. That's another trait that keeps them not needing a lot of water. So on the left is dianthus. That's another one that really doesn't like acidic soil. Stakes byzantina, or lamb's ear, without the flower. People have pretty much moved away from that old-fashioned kind. And lavender, which of course is incredibly fragrant and wonderful. But again, none of these want to be wet. So Iris, a lot of iris, except Japanese iris, are fine with some drought. Excuse me. Two on the left are Germanicas or bearded iris. I just happened to pick those because I thought they were cool colors together. Two on the right are Sibiricas. And I actually do have the Côte d'Azur I bought a couple of years ago. I think you know by now I kind of like blue plants. So, but great plants for drought tolerance and for cut flower, and later on just for some nice strappy foliage. I know some people like hot colors, and so I'm putting them in here. And if I were to have a hot garden, which, sometimes I kind of wish I could put one in, but I don't have any space here. And it would mess up my color scheme. But Nephofia, which is also called red hot poker or tritoma, and there's a few different varieties and colors of them. Great late, long blooming perennial. Has to have incredibly good drainage. It likes it hot next to, a patio, whatever. And then the globe thistle, which is not so fussy. I love that plant. My mother grew that. And then, and it cools down the hot colors. It gives good contrast. On the right is a type of lantana. I just thought these all looked really cute together. And that's an annual, of course. So again, here's just a collection of things. On the left is a salvia. It's an annual one. It blooms very late. It's an edible type, even though it's an annual. It's not, the kind that you put in your, dressing for Thanksgiving. But it's pineapple sage, so it has a pineapple-y flavor. It's delicious. Tithonia is Mexican sunflower, it's called. I think there's a little bit of a color thing going on with the foliage here. I don't think it's quite that blue. It'd be nice, but I don't think it is. But it's still a very handsome plant. Gets quite large. You've got to have room for it. Just keep it deadhead. It'll just keep going all summer. And then moonshine, achillea or yarrow, is a perennial, and I thought that was a nice group of hot colors. Begonia angelique is really hard to find, and I looked and looked and looked and looked, and there may be some out there, which I'm sure I'll find out after I finish all this, that there are some other shade annuals that will take dryness. So most of my shade annuals tend to go into pots anyway, where it's much more controlled. It's not such a big deal if you have to come out with a watering can to do a container. But things like impatiens and stuff are not, a lot of the annuals that are for shade are just not drought tolerant. But I do love this kind of begonia, but I only like it in a container. And there are other colors. I think it's very elegant, looks like roses. So on the left, it's a weird angle, but it's another container. It's a cement container that sits next to my driveway. And there are perennials in it and annuals. There are two, as you can see, heuchera, the gumdrop, silver gumdrop. There's dichondra, which is the silver plant, and that trails beautifully. And then in the middle is a hot pink begonia. So in the middle slide is the Verbena bonariensis again. The bonariensis part comes from Buenos Aires. That's how it got its name. And it is loved by butterflies. And Cosmos is an annual that will take, once you get it going, will take some drought. And I was kind of smitten with these little cupcakes and saucers. So I actually ordered some of those. And then the Gora, which a lot of people love, is a great likes dry, good drainage, very airy. Here's some native perennials for sun. Allium cernua, which will actually take some shade. I just happen to think it's a very, very beautiful native allium. And it is called, what's it called? Not drooping allium. Oh gosh, I can't think of it. I'll think of it in a minute. Anyway, Achillea millefolium is trying to see if I can find that. I can't find it. Anyway, the Achillea millefolium on the right is the native type is the white one. There are white ones that are also cultivars, but we do have a white one. I'm sure you've seen it. Nodding onion, that's what it's called, nodding onion, because it does nod over. So those are two native perennials that I like quite a bit. Here are some native perennials that are, you know, I've actually really seen, so they're ones that do grow in New England. The Asarum canadensis is the wild ginger. The European ginger is much glossier than the native one. And on the bottom is the flower, which is blown up. It's not that big. Not the prettiest thing in the world, but it's nice to know it actually has one, but it's always underneath the leaves. Tiarella cordifolia, that's what it looks like in nature. I mean, you can buy them, but they don't really look like that when you buy them. I don't know if those are cultivars or what, but and both are pretty. But down the bottom here is Christmas fern, one of my favorite ferns, and also extremely tough. And then two asters, which no longer are called aster, at least botanically. Eurybia and Symphotrichum are the two. Eurybia divaricata on the top, and Symphotrichum cordifolia on the bottom. They're both wood asters, white and blue wood aster, and I'm sure you've seen these growing. So those are some good ones. Nice local plants. Other plants for dry shade that are not native, and which I think everybody knows, hosta, but if you have deer, I don't know what to tell you. You got to figure out a way to not let them eat it. And then according to epimedian expert Karen Perkins, who I actually have known for years, she's said that these three, sulphurium, which I have huge clumps of, orange Conagan Werleyansi, and Paralchicum fronleighton. I don't know if that's right. Those are good drought tolerant ones. I used to be under the impression that all epimedium were, and that is not the case. So there are probably more. I know the rosium tends to be drought tolerant too, and that and the sulphurium are quite easy to get. So, and you know, they're showing up some interesting ones at nurseries, but be sure if you're looking for drought tolerant, be sure the ones you're buying really are. It's just a little combination I thought would look cool together. Cucarella or a Tiarella would look good with this Ophiopogon nigrescens or black mondo grass. If you ever seen this plant, it's so interesting. One time I saw a picture of white birch, a little group of white birch, completely underplanted with this black mondo grass. It was spectacular. And as we get warm, it'll be easier to grow something like this. It doesn't want to be wet in it, you know, right near the edge of a little stone thing is probably a good place, but I think it's getting so we're not having as much difficulty as we used to growing a plant like that. Here's some great things for the garden. On the left are different kinds, and there are many more different kinds of opium poppies, Papaver somniferum. And I grow a few of them. I'd like to grow everything, but I don't have room. Really quite easy by seed, and usually once you get them going, you'll keep having them. You just keep throwing the seeds around. In the middle, so that's an annual. In the middle is another annual called Nigella damascena, and it's also called Love in a Mist, which is a beautiful, beautiful name. It's blue, and it is sort of a signature flower for me. I absolutely love the plant, and I actually wore it in my hair for my wedding. And the bottom is a little bit of pink perennial geranium. I think it's I can't remember which one it is. It'll come to me anyway. On the right are hollyhocks. They are really a biennial, but if you cut the flowers stalks down before it really goes to seed, so right after it's done blooming, cut it, it can act quite perennial. Otherwise, it is definitely going to be a biennial. And at the bottom, I believe there are larkspur, which is another annual that's like a delphinium. Okay, I'm getting there. Sedums, this one is, I should have written these on the thing. I hope they're on your list, but that's Angelina, Sedum Angelina, the gold one. Sedum Lighticense at the top, which does flower and gets a really pretty like raspberry pink flower. They're both quite low and they look nice together. On the right is Color Guard Yucca. Lower left is Pennisetum alopecuroides. Next one, the blue spruce is Montgomery spruce and doesn't get too tall. And then again, another holly. So my idea here was these would be great plants to use around a contemporary building. You know, in my yard, and this is my yard, this is against the back of my garage here, and then a close-up of a poppy called Lauren's grape. You can see the seed pod. And when that seed pod gets completely brown, and you can shake it and hear the seeds inside, just throw them around, and you'll get some. Just don't dig around and never dig in your garden too early. Don't dig. Don't flop that soil all around. You're gonna dislodge some tiny, cute little things. So here it is on the right, and at the forefront is the Carol Mackey Daphne, no longer in bloom. I've got hellebores no longer in bloom. The blue spruce, I do have delphinium, which are not drought tolerant. I've got roses, I've got poppies, I've got iris, I've got a bunch of things that are pretty drought tolerant. And some of the annuals, the cool annuals that I buy, some of them do self-sow. And again, you got to wait a bit before you pull things up and they'll bloom later. But yeah, these are the kind of colors that I prefer. So you can always spot water. You can have things mixed up, but you don't have to throw the sprinkler on. It's going to water everything. Just go around and go, oh, I know the delphinium probably wants a drink or this needs a drink. You don't have to, blanket water everything. Just another, look at some ornamental grasses. It's a native one, the blue stem on the left, the fescue, blue fescue in the middle, and another shot of the pennisetum. And there's a bunch of different types of pennisetum you should know. There's a lot of really great looking ones. This was when I first started this, I wanted to find a picture of a garden that was truly a drought. Everything was drought tolerant. And this is one in England, in Cambridge. And I started to think, oh yeah, but it's England. They probably get some rain, a lot of rain. And then I found out that this place is one of the driest places in the UK. There you go. A lot of really cool plants. And if you look this place up, you will find more information about them. It is the Cambridge Botanic Garden. I think that might be on one of the handouts, but write that down otherwise, because it is a really, they were so nice to me, and they really work. It only relies on rainwater. Okay, that's amazing. All right, so here's some resources and books and magazines and different things, articles, places I like to buy plants, especially ones that are focused on drought tolerant. And remember, bulbs go dormant. So they're there in the spring, it's wet, you don't have to worry about them. And then by the time it starts to get a little nerve-wracking with the water, they're on their way underground and they'll be fine. And I think this, I think these are hopefully on your, but I'll just run through this. So you can just make sure you get drought tolerant things, a lot of choices. Transplanting, be careful with that. Don't plant and transplant when it's hot. Do it on a yucky day early or late in the season. Mulch around your plants. And there's that big thing about leaving the leaves, which, I have a little trouble with because I'm like to be really neat. But I did leave them on all winter. Water deeply and not a lot. Don't water lightly all the time. You're never gonna get a good root system. Water in the morning or early in the evening. Um, da, 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 da. Yep, just water according to what is needed. Build up your soil. Some things really will need more moisture retentive material. Get a rain barrel, use soaker hoses, grow plants where it's the correct place. This thing about drought tolerant plants are pros at pulling water from other plants, so they'll likely win the water war. That's a little nerve wracking. I haven't noticed that being a really huge issue, but it could be. And again, when you should do your transplanting. As a rule, native plants are more adaptable, but that doesn't mean every native plant is going to be drought tolerant. And finally, mini witoni is a Lakota phrase that means it's about the Native Americans and their protests for the at what is it called, the rock place, Standing Rock, when they were protesting. And what they believe is water does not only sustain life, it is sacred. And they were going to redirect the water and leave it impossible for these people to use their water. So I thought this was a really beautiful photo. Not sure where it is, but I love the moss and the ferns and everything else. And with that, I will say good night, and I hope I haven't gone on too long. And I'm ready to answer questions. So thanks for listening.
Okay, we've got a few questions. One of them is, how do we get a copy of the slides and the info? And I can answer that one. I pasted all the links to the handouts in the chat, and then this whole thing is being recorded and it'll be on our website, so you can play it over again whenever you'd like. The next question is, happy to learn about plant skid. Do you have experience with it on veggie gardens, or do you have other ideas for the rascally rabbits?
Yeah, silly rabbits. That's what I have trouble with because I don't really have deer where I am. But I don't grow a lot of vegetables. I will tell you that I was growing what are those little yellow tomatoes that are so sweet, the little gold tomatoes. I can't remember what they're called. Anyway, and I was looking out my window one day, something caught my eye, and my tomato plant was rocking back and forth. Okay. And I'm like, okay, it is not windy, it's the middle of the summer. There wasn't a rabbit, it was a chipmunk was climbing up my tomato plant, and I was wondering why it wasn't producing. Well, it was just being eaten. So to answer your question, plant skid will work on any plant, okay? It will. I just hadn't thought about using it out there because I'd never had anything eating that stuff. I actually have those in my herb garden. I don't grow a lot of veggies. But the nice thing about plant skid is that it's not toxic or anything. It just smells in a way that they don't like it. It does smell bad. And at a certain point in the summer, I like to use the granules, but sometimes I also like to spray as well. The granules last longer, but they don't get on the foliage. So yeah, but that's fine. It's not poisonous. So it's fine to use pretty much on anything. So that's that.
Okay, I just got a comment that said they couldn't see the handouts. I pasted it again in the chat, so you should be able to see them.
Okay.
The next question is there an easy way to separate iris?
They're not hard to separate, actually. The best way to do it is kind of dig them all up. And then sometimes, I mean, I'm not all fussy and with them. I mean, I'll just pull them, you know. And what you want to do is you want to get rid of what's in the center because that's the oldest and is not going to bloom as well as some of the newer stuff growing on the outer edges. And you can kind of just, you know, yank them apart. But if you don't feel like you can possibly do that, take a sharp knife and do it that way. I hope that helps. They're not delicate plants.
Okay, someone asked if you could repeat the name of the chipmunk deterrent.
It's the same deterrent for everything. It's called plant skid. However, I will tell you, and I'm a little hesitant, but I'll say it anyway. I had one year, I couldn't figure out what was going on. I had these beautiful apricot colored species tulips under my birch trees, and I was excited, and one of my friends said, "Hey, you know, some of them are like on the ground." I go, "Oh, those damn rabbits," you know. And then the next day, all of them were on the ground. And I went over to look, and they weren't being eaten. That was what I suddenly realized. I go, they're on the ground, but they're not eating them. So what gives? They were dug up, and they were dug up, and the bulbs were eaten, and that was chipmunks or squirrels. So the next year, when I planted any new bulbs that might be, you know, tasty to those kind of guys, I planted them with red pepper flakes. And then a good friend of mine said, "Oh my God, it will kill them." And I thought, I don't think so. I mean, I'd hate to think I haven't seen any dead chipmunks in my yard. So I don't think so. And I think they take one bite and then go, "Oh, I'm not going to do that." You know what I mean? So I'm just saying that it has worked for me. It has worked for me.
I've
And
also
it,
heard of planting them in cages or
oh
under
yeah, but
mesh. Does that work?
yes, but do you know how many bulbs I plant in this yard every year? I mean, I'd be, you know, out there, you know, on New Year's Day still planting bulbs. I couldn't possibly, um, yeah, if you don't have a lot,
Okay.
you know.
Um, the next question is, can mature holly that is too big in front of my house be transplanted?
That's anybody's guess. And when you say mature, you know, how big are we talking? I've seen them transplanted. Um, one of my clients, you know, I was like, "Just throw them away." "Oh no, I'm gonna transplant." And they did live, and he transplanted them, and I was like, "Whatever." Yeah, we were redoing an area, and I remember another person I knew transplanted them, and I can't remember how well they did. That sometimes it's more trouble than it's worth, and especially if it's not anything that's super unusual and rare and special. Um, it's more trouble than it's worth, especially given that it might not make it. And then you've gone to all that trouble, and you know, you might as well have just bought a new one. So that's my feeling. Uh, you know, it's up to you if you want to risk it. Let's put it that way. And certainly make sure it's good and wet, that the roots are really wet. Um, you know, before you dig it up, and that you've dug a hole for it to go into before you put it in the hole, and you know, keep it watered well enough and hope for the best.
Okay, someone just said the repellent is spelled PLANTSYDD and they've bought it.
SKYDD.
Okay, and they bought it off Amazon.
Yeah, you can.
Okay.
It's less money there than it is some places, you know, to buy it like in a store. It's still not cheap, I can tell you that. Um, but it's, of all the ones I've used, it's been the most effective.
Okay. The next person says, I have hellebores in pots. When should I plant them outside?
You know, as a rule, I don't plant until, um, uh, like mid to late April, okay? The hellebores you probably could do before that, but, and I've been seeing them places for sale, because people, they want them and, yeah. And I'll tell you another thing about them. They say don't transplant them, in the spring, do it in the fall. And one time I was moving and it was the spring, and I was like, I am taking that baby with me. And I dug it up and I actually divided it and it was fine. So they're not quite as delicate as some people might tell you they are. The same with peonies. Oh, don't plant, and I've done it. I've moved them when they say you're not supposed to. As long as you're careful, it's not so bad. So yeah, I mean, I would wait. You could probably stick it outside. It's the issue is putting a plant into cold, wet ground. You know what I mean? Um, the roots might rot. That would be my fear. Probably not with the hellebore, but it's just not something I've actually ever done that I've put in anything this early. So I would, if you're worried about it not getting enough light or something, stick it outside in a sheltered place until you feel like it's really time to plant it. And remember, don't deadhead your hellebores, because you'll get babies. And the reason they're so expensive is because they grow so slowly. Um, they take a long time. So I just, every year or so, I buy a couple more, add to my collection.
The next question is, do you need to reapply plant skid every time it rains?
The spray one, I think you do. I don't think it really stays on. That's why I do both. And you know, I usually just, in fact, I usually just use the granules because it's easier, it's less time consuming. You don't feel like your hand's gonna fall off because you've been squirting the thing for 30 minutes. Um, but again, if they stand up and they bite that delphinium, well, they won't do it till delphinium, but certain plants, they bite it in half, and you're like, oh my God, if I'd only sprayed it, they wouldn't have done it. So I would think about doing both. Um, and it's a pain in the neck. I mean, I've got bunnies, believe me. I've already, I saw one like 2 weeks ago. It was huge. Um,
It looks like we have one final comment.
okay.
Thanks for the organized resources and all the beautiful options. I can't wait to try a few in my very small space.
Well, that's good to hear because I wanted to get people inspired and thinking about how to put these plants together. And people ask me, how do you know so much? Did you go to school? I'm like, nope. It's just I love it. I love it. I love plants. It's what I do, like, all the time. I'm, neurotic. But so the more neurotic you are about it, the more you will know.
All
Anyway,
right.
thank you, everybody. Appreciate you being here tonight. Thanks.
Thank you, Susan, for presenting, and thank you, everyone, for coming. I hope
Okay.
you will join us tomorrow for our lecture on composting. And then I hope you'll also join us at Kennedy's Country Gardens on Saturday for our live expo. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.